over the many years. With that, I'm going to call on Terry Strada, who has been a leader amongst many of the families, the hundreds of families that support this legislation. Terry.
Hello, my name is Terry Strada. Thank you for coming today. I am the national co-chair of the 9/11 Families United for Justice Against Terrorism. I speak on behalf of over 6,000 victims' families and survivors, and I graciously thank Senator Schumer for his hard work and continued support of the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act called JASTA. For 13 years, we have fought for the truth, accountability, and justice for the murder of our loved ones and the pain and suffering inflicted on us when 19 hijackers boarded 4 commercial airplanes and used them as missiles to attack us here on American soil. My husband, Tom Strada, was only 41 years old when he was brutally murdered along with 3,000 other innocent men, women, and children. He is loved and missed dearly by his family each and every day. Along with the hijackers themselves, the other culprits behind the worst terrorist attacks on our nation are the people who bankroll the terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and countless others. Al-Qaeda did not act alone. 9/11 took a lot of money, millions in fact, and hundreds of millions continue to support terrorist organizations across the globe. As long as there are well-funded radical Islamists who continue to vow to kill Americans, we are not safe. These terrorist organizations operate in the cloak of darkness and depend on massive sums of money to carry out their daily operations and heinous acts of brutality and murder. We need JASTA in order to restore what Congress always intended. And I may be repeating myself here, but like Senator Schumer said, Americans have the right to hold accountable in our courts those who wish to do us harm, give financial aid, logistical support, and murder us on American soil, no matter where they come from or who they may be. The threat of future attacks is very real and becoming more serious each and every day. As long as the financiers continue to supply funding to terrorist organizations with impunity, they will continue to repeat themselves over and over again. We must take every action possible to ensure our safety. Stopping the flow of money is a strong deterrent and one we should not hesitate to use. In the United States today, it is still a crime to finance the murder or deliberate physical harm to anyone. People aiding and abetting in the planning and implementation of such crimes are considered complicit and, according to our own laws, must be held accountable. JASTA makes this clear. It doesn't matter where the underlying wrongful act or omission occurs or is committed. If you support terrorism directed at the United States, you can be brought to account for it in our U.S. courts. JASTA also makes it clear that those responsible for terror attacks on American soil, whether they pulled the trigger themselves or paid the trigger men to do it, you can be held accountable and brought to justice. 13 years ago, I never could have imagined that my family would be torn apart by terrorism. I want to remind the American people, another attack like 9/11, or possibly of a greater magnitude, can happen again. If we don't stop the flow of money going to the terrorists, I'm afraid it will happen again. We stand here today, all of us, forever connected by our grief and united in our quest for justice. We are committed to succeeding in creating a safer country. JASTA is needed to help deter future terrorist attacks. JASTA is for all Americans. Thank you very much. Terry, T-E-R-R-Y, Strada, S-T-R-A-D-A. The 9/11 Families United for Justice Against Terrorism.
They've been the leader. Anyone else want to say anything? Okay. I just want to thank Terry and all of those with her. As I told them privately, you know, when something so terrible, so evil, so not understandable happens to you, the The natural human reaction is to what the scriptures say, curse the darkness. Be angry, withdraw in on yourself. Just feel what had happened to you in such an unfair way. What the scriptures tell us is that when you light a candle, and you try to bring some justice or some change, it's very hard to do, it takes enormous strength and fortitude, but it's a saintly thing to do. And every one of the people here, many different ages, have that ability to light a candle. And I think I speak on behalf of all Americans. We so respect you for it. Okay, we'll take questions to Terry and to me on this subject.
Sir, you said that this is only applying to 9/11 victims.
Yeah, let me just say, right now you cannot sue any act of terrorism. Legislation will apply to all those who were victims of 9/11 and any victims after that through the present day and the future.
Can you just also describe potential civil litigation?
I'm sorry, you have to speak a little
Can you
louder.
describe the kind of potential civil litigation that you're talking about?
Yeah, well, these are groups, and it's pretty clear, and they'll be able to prove it in court, that funded Al-Qaeda. And there are similar groups funding ISIS. There are nations that funded Al-Qaeda, such as Saudi Arabia. And there are nations we believe that are funding ISIS. Those countries and groups can be sued for damages for the loss of loved ones, which is a large amount of money. And it will not only bring a little bit, tiny bit of justice to the folks here, but will tell groups in the future, you better not do this.
So this money you're talking about, those structural changes, those changes?
It's a financial record.
Can you guess on numbers?
So who are these groups that you think of down the list that are going to be affected and what nations?
There are all kinds of groups. I believe that Saudi Arabia would be affected. It's probably likely that Qatar will be affected. If you have funded Hamas, Hamas has also killed Americans. They would be subject to this law. Any terrorist group that is funded by an outside state or group will be susceptible to being sued. Now you have to prove in court that they actually funded the terrorism and the group is a terrorist group.
Well, can it also be individuals or companies, corporations?
It is company, it is corporations, it is groups, and it is countries.
Individuals?
I do not believe the legislation affects individuals.
Well, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia
Can you go talk
is a
to
monarchy,
the mic?
so...
Come to the podium, please.
Thank you.
The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is a monarchy, so the families of the monarchy are also the government. So yes, individuals can be sued.
That way, yes.
Senator, what do you think is the likelihood of actually seeing money from this?
I think there's a very strong likelihood. My guess is if this legislation passes, they may actually, some of these countries that did this, rather than go through a trial which shows the evilness of what they did, might want to settle. That will be up to the families, whether they want to do that or go through the trial. But I think the likelihood of success once we pass this legislation is strong. It is incontrovertible that Al-Qaeda, Hamas, ISIS, and others are labeled terrorist groups. That's one thing you need to prove. And it is well known that they funded, that Saudi Arabia, other countries, other groups funded these groups, these terrorism organizations, funded Hamas, funded Al-Qaeda, funded ISIS.
Do you think it'll cause tensions with U.S. relations to allies like Saudi Arabia?
Doesn't matter. Justice must be done. He asked, would it cause tensions with allies, so-called allies like Saudi Arabia? I said, it doesn't matter. Justice must be done. They did a horrible thing.
You say Saudi Arabia, but they say that all allies of the United States are
Well,
connected.
Saudi Arabia has played a very interesting game. On the one hand, they're allies of the U.S., and on the other hand, it is well proven, well believed that they funded Al-Qaeda. And many of the Saudi royal family members did.
This is also out because we're just talking about the Middle East, but there's also presence in Africa.
It would affect Boko Haram if they hurt an American, killed an American. It would affect any group labeled by the State Department a terrorist group worldwide.
And the act of terrorism on the Venezuela.
Yes, there has to be an act of terrorism that kills Americans. Nexus. The country or company has to have some nexus with it. Okay? Please.
How long did we vote on